We are on.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I would like to extend a warm welcome to everybody who has joined with us this morning. My name is Faiza Solanki. I'm an architect, urban planner by training, and I work as a senior program associate with the climate program at the World Resources Institute, India. So WRI develops practical solutions that improve people's lives and ensure natures can thrive. On behalf of WRI-India and EEEE, EcoCollab, and Mahindra Life Spaces, I am privileged to welcome you all for the launch event of the Voluntary Business Charter on value chain approach to decarbonize the building and construction sector in India. So before we start, a few housekeeping announcements. All attendees will remain in silent mode only. And please make sure you select the join with computer audio. Try rejoining in case you're unable to hear the audio. Please use the question box on the panel to your right to post questions during the event. We will try to take the questions up during the panel discussion session. We request you to kindly ask crisp and clear questions. Please note that the event is being recorded and will be made available to all registered participants. Requesting everybody to please switch on their videos if your bandwidth kindly allows. As we begin the event, may I now take this opportunity to humbly welcome and introduce our distinguished speakers for their opening remarks. I would now like to introduce and invite Mr. Arvind Subramaniam, Managing Director and CEO at Mahindra Lifespace Developers Private Limited and member of the Group Executive Board. Mr. Arvind joined Mahindra Lifespaces in 2018 as CEO of Mahindra Happiness, the affordable housing business. Mr. Arvind is also currently the co-chair of CII's Urban Development and Smart Cities Council and serves on IGBC's executive board. He holds an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and a BTech from the Institute of Technology, Madras. He is passionate in the intersection between business growth and social impact. Mr. Arvind, the floor is open for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Faiza, and good morning to my fellow panelists and all of you who've joined this exciting event to launch this business charter. At the outset, let me offer that we must view the decarbonization journey or the imperative of decarbonization through a prism of opportunity rather than obligation. And let me explain why. Let's take the obligation lens, or what we would commonly call the glass half empty lens. We all know that building and construction sector is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. Combined, it's responsible for about 36% of the global energy consumption, 40% of total direct and indirect carbon dioxide emissions. Energy use in buildings has grown by 1% per annum since 2015. And electricity use has grown by 2.5% per annum over that same period. Carbon dioxide emissions continue to rise by nearly 1% per annum too. And although a lot of progress has been made on green building codes, green building certification, investments, admittedly, the impact and the progress has been slow. So reaching net zero emission, even by 2070, let alone 2050, is going to require that buildings and construction, our industry, decarbonize 3 times faster over the next 30 years compared to what they've done over the last 30 years. And with rising population and urbanization, we in India are going to add something like 2.4 trillion square feet of new floor area to our building stock. Just to put that in perspective, that is the equivalent of adding the entire land area of New York City every month. The entire land area of New York City every month for the next 40 years. That's staggering. What's worse is that on current course, we are on a path to exacerbate the problem rather than alleviate it. We all know that there's a steady growth in urbanization, and that is a good thing. Let's make no bones about it. But from roughly 400 million Indians who live in urban agglomerations today, we expect that by 2050, there will be double that amount. So about 800 million Indians will be living in urban centers. And so far, we do know that urban centers have a higher intensity of energy consumption for homes, for offices, for transportation. So how do we solve this problem? Let me switch attention or switch tack to what I call the opportunity prism rather than the obligation prism, or the glass half full. In fact, the glass 70% full. And why do I say 70%? Because as per estimates from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, 70% of buildings required in India till 2050 still need to be built. And therefore, you can imagine the impact we can have if we act now. While developed countries are almost entirely dependent on retrofitting existing buildings, driving energy efficiency, replacing equipment, and getting efficiency in public transportation, we in India have a unique, unparalleled opportunity to create what I would call a born carbon efficient. So from the birth itself, creating a born carbon efficient urban built environment. And this will be low carbon. This will be transit oriented development. This will be mixed use in nature. And as I said, entirely virgin greenfield development. So what is the call to action? We need to act with urgency. It's very clear to all of us to limit global carbon emissions and adhere to the 1.5 degree pathway. So in India, we must commit that all new buildings will be fossil free and net zero by 2030. All new buildings will be fossil free and net zero by 2030. But also by 2050, we must ensure a near complete phase out of emissions from the existing stock of buildings as well. I draw your attention to 3 aspects of the solution. A, embodied carbon in building materials. We know that widely used construction materials like concrete, steel, aluminum are major contributors to embodied carbon. And widespread use of RCC in the buildings is also leading to thermal discomfort, which in turn leads to a higher demand on air conditioning and energy usage. There is therefore an opportunity to develop low carbon alternative walling materials for thermal comfort. And it's heartening to see that many startups in India are starting to address this problem at scale. B, climate responsive design. This is region specific architecture, which can contribute to significant reduction in energy usage, energy consumption, as well as embodied carbon. And C, we need to think about the life cycle impact of our built environment, and particularly end of life construction debris and how we deal with it. The building sector can significantly reduce energy by incorporating these energy efficient strategies into the early design, the construction, as well as the operations of new buildings, and by undertaking retrofits to the existing building stock. At Mahindra Lifespaces, we are committed to science-based targets and carbon neutrality by 2030. And we're using exactly these strategies. So demand reduction through climate responsive design and naturally ventilated buildings, focusing on energy efficient design and construction methods, and renewable energy integration, both on-site as well as off-site. And in fact, early evidence shows that our strategies have helped our customers enjoy myriad benefits: well-ventilated buildings, naturally illuminated, healthy homes, and a reduced cost of maintenance. So in conclusion, I believe that the dichotomy between growth and carbon neutrality is in fact a false dichotomy. It is possible to achieve both. And through our learning at Mahindra Lifespaces, being a pioneer in green buildings and industrial developments, we have come to realize the power, the immense power of stakeholder collaboration in accelerating the journey towards net zero. The decarbonization business charter, which we are launching today, is an outcome of such collaboration with WRI, EcoCollab, and AEEE. And I'm confident that the combined commitments and actions of all the signatories to this decarbonization charter will ensure that we reach our destination ahead of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Arvind, for those insightful opening remarks. It is my pleasure to now invite Dr. Satish Kumar, President and Executive Director of the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, AEEE. Prior to AEEE, he was the Energy Efficient Ambassador and led multiple energy management business portfolios at the Schneider Electric India, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and USAID-supported bilateral energy efficiency technical assistant programs. He holds a PhD and a BArch and is a member of the TEAP's Energy Efficiency Task Force under the Montreal Protocol. Dr. Satish, the floor is open for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, am I audible?
Yes.
Good morning to all the participants who have joined us today. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this event on the launch of the business charter for decarbonizing the building and construction sector in India. AEEE believes that this is a very, very important topic, and it's a very important occasion and an honor to be interacting with all of you who have tuned in for this event. As we all know, just hold on, sorry about that. As you all know, that the population and economic growth is leading to an urbanization boom in India. And if you look at the number of urban towns and cities, they are on a phenomenal growth trajectory. We also understand, and especially I think the core partners who worked on this initiative, that this urbanization is going to lead to a very fast growth in the construction of buildings and housing projects, and would also spur the demand for conventional construction materials like cement, steel, bricks, and other widely used materials. We also understand that these construction materials are highly energy and emissions intensive and are responsible for the embodied carbon from the building and construction sector. And embodied carbon takes a pretty important role in the Indian context, because what we are seeing that when we look at the developed country, the role of, I think, the operational energy is about 80–85%. And therefore, I think a whole lot of effort is not expended to address the embodied carbon element. But if we look at the Indian construction industry, the way Indian buildings are designed, and the low level of penetration of appliances and HVAC systems and other things, the embodied carbon content rises significantly. I think our estimate is it's approximately 40%, and it is probably more than 50% in the residential segment if we are looking at it. So that, I think, calls for a much more aggressive approach to reduce that operational energy, to reduce the embodied carbon content in India's buildings. I also feel that the way we have used and are still building need to change, as our Prime Minister has made the pledge to decarbonize its economy by 2070 at the recently concluded COP26. And in order to fulfill these targets and commitments, it is important to identify and implement sector-specific low-carbon interventions with ambitious and achievable timelines. Further, there is a need for sector-specific roadmaps for emissions-intensive sector, such as the building and construction sector. So what is AEEE doing? I know that I think we have worked in a consortium fashion, but I do want to give three, I think, key examples of our flagship projects where we are working with the larger industry, the larger ecosystem, and also contributing to some new knowledge, which we believe is going to be pretty important. So the first project is AEEE's flagship program called Solar Decathlon India. It is one of a kind competition for multidisciplinary postgraduate and undergraduate students from Indian institutions to partner with real estate developers. And I want to acknowledge the support that we have received from Mahindra Lifespace and the industry professionals to develop net zero energy, water, waste, and climate resilient solutions on actual projects. This is a platform where equipment manufacturers, real estate industry, government agencies, and academia are collaborating to create large scale change and impact. The program or the platform that we are building aims to change the DNA of the entire building sector towards a climate resilient and net zero future by producing and equipping the next generation of architects and engineers who will be equipped from a first principles concepts and who will be the agent of change, I think, for the future in terms of building a net zero economy. The second initiative that I want to talk about is that AEEE is developing a very detailed bottom-up and a highly granular building sector model that would allow us to look at policy pathways, whether we are talking like Econivas Samhita, whether we are looking at ECBC implementation, or even net zero building code, which we believe is going to come, I think, sooner rather than later. Standards and labeling, technology development, some of the things where some of the technologies that are getting developed for cooling and providing thermal comfort in a much more environmental friendly manner. And what is the trajectory of some of those technologies, I think, over the next decade or two that is going to happen. And the economic growth that is going to happen, which will reshape the Indian built habitat to help and address some of the interventions that are needed to decarbonize the building sector. And third is, of course, we are also working with the larger industry, which recently organized a forum on energy efficiency and decarbonization. And there was a session on decarbonizing the building construction sector in India, where some of the leading experts participated, and they came away with three key takeaways for this particular sector. So first is climate responsive passive design, which can contribute to significant reduction in building energy consumption and embodied carbon as well. We believe this is the first and most important thing that has to be done, irrespective of what kind of building is getting designed, whether it's low and affordable housing in Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, or the most high-tech data centers or hospitals, or the airports that are getting designed in Leh, which is a carbon neutral building that Government of India is attempting to do. However, we are still witnessing, I think, some basic lack of understanding. And that's why we believe that, I think, equipping the next generation of professionals with the kind of, I think, knowledge that will be required is going to be very important. Second is there is a need to publish data on, of course, energy consumption. Public disclosure, I think, is going to be very, very important to usher in the change that we are looking for. And also the GHG emissions content, I think, in terms of product profiles that some of the companies have started to publish, because I think it's just a matter of time when government is going to come up with the standards on, I think, maybe I think requiring or even forcing the manufacturers to start disclosing this information. This would require a supply chain level kind of intervention where companies will need to collect, I think, the carbon consumption at various points of time to be able to publish this. And then third is shifting focus away from energy savings to broader environmental protection and resource conservation in the construction sector. So to conclude, on behalf of the core partners led by World Resources Institute and supported by AEEE, EcoCollab, and Mahindra Lifespace Developers Limited, I sincerely thank all the companies who signed the business charter and agreed to work on the specific actions that we are calling for. The signatories include 16 companies from diverse backgrounds consisting developers, architectural firms, alternative building material manufacturers, designers, consultants, and others. Also, I would like to thank all the stakeholders who have participated in the discussions and provided their valuable and critical inputs. Finally, I would like to thank World Resources Institute India for leading this collaborative effort, and the core partners for extending their strong support in making this happen. I think the team at AEEE wishes, I think, this initiative all the success, and we are looking forward to taking the next step and working on the phase 2 of this program as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Satish, for those insightful opening remarks and sharing with us the incredible steps taken by AEEE. May I now cordially invite and introduce Dr. O.P. Agarwal, CEO WRI-India, to share his insights. Prior to joining WRI-India, Dr. Agarwal was the Executive Director at the Indian School of Business and chaired the US Transport Research Board's Committee on Transportation in Developing Countries. He has served as the member of the Indian Administrative Service (IAS) and has held several positions from 1979 to 2007. During his tenure as the head of the Urban Transport Division of the Government of India, he authored India's National Urban Transport Policy, a document that outlines the priorities for sustainable urban transport at all levels of the government. Dr. Agarwal, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faiza, and delight to hear both Mr. Subramanian and Mr. Satish Kumar. I think there is nothing new that I can say after the comments that they have made. The only thing I would like to highlight is that moving from commitments to action is a very different ball game. Commitments get made at a negotiating table where you have a few people from every country who come together and decide on something. But translating that into action is a much bigger game and needs many, many, many more people to get involved with the whole thing. So really involving people working across sectors, it's a Herculean task that we have to take up. As very rightly mentioned, the buildings and construction sector will be critical. It has already been pointed out that India's urban population is going to double in about the next 30 years. I mean, in effect, what this means is that in that next one generation, we will add as many people to urban India as we've added from the beginning of civilization. And Mr. Arvind Subramaniam's point about adding one New York every month for the next 40 years is something that should point out how important the buildings and construction sector is going to be. It's absolutely right to say that 70% of the building stock that we're going to see is yet to be built. And we can begin with a low carbon path. I think that is the opportunity that India has. So I think this is excellent, and I'm really happy that we are partnering with such eminent core partners. I'm already very delighted that we have 16 signatories to this charter. I'm sure that we'll have many more. We have to work together in doing many, many more things. Mr. Satish Kumar mentioned about the importance of building talent, building capacity. That is something that's very important. We've recognized that also and have started a new program, which is really intended at building capacities at mid-career professionals or people who are already on the job. We are calling it the Leaders in Climate Change Management Program. The idea is to create about a nucleus of about 5,000 people across different sectors who will be able to lead climate action from multiple places, places where they work, multiple sectors, whether it is cities, whether it is districts, whether it is blocks, really create a whole spectrum of these people. In my conversations with Mr. Godrej, he always tells me that look at the building sector. This is going to be very important. Roll out this program within the building sector. We are in conversations with CII, and we are getting in touch with the Green Building Council as well to see how we can take this forward. But delighted that we are part of this, delighted that we have such eminent partners, and I would be failing without recognizing the support that has been given to us by Bloomberg Philanthropies. They've been very supportive to us in WRI for many, many years. Delighted that you've supported us for this. We look forward to your continued support as we roll this out. Thank you very much, and back to you, Faiza.
Thank you, Dr. O.P. Agarwal, for setting the context right and opening the event go by signaling on commitment to actions. We now move to the most expected moment of today's event. May I now again invite Dr. O.P. Agarwal to officially launch the business charter. Sir, you may like to press the launch button on the right of your screen, and the charter will be displayed on all of our screens.
Is this the launch button, which is, it says launch charter?
Yes.
It seems to be inactive on my screen.
So just click.
That's what I'm trying to click, but seems to be a dumb link. Okay. Is that the one?
Yeah, it's done. It's opening.
The link to the business charter is also available in the chat box for all participants. At this important gesture, we would like to acknowledge our 16 signatories on board: Argus Groups, Carbon Craft, CDE Asia, Dr. Stan, C&T Architects, EcoFirst, EDS, Greenforms Private Limited, Green Jams, Green Tech Knowledge Solutions Private Limited, Green Tea, Humangi, JSW, Loda, Mahindra Life Spaces, McD World, and Sahas Zero Waste. Thank you so much for the trust and commitment to establish a foundation and leading to strive net zero in the construction sector by signing up to the charter. We look forward to continuing working with you on the significant initiatives ahead. Could I also request the signatories to please turn on your video so that we could take a snapshot for social media with your kind permission? With immense pleasure, I would also like to convey that the industry-led business charter has been endorsed by Mr. G. Anand Mahindra, Executive Chairman, Mahindra Group. Let's hear a pre-recorded message from Mr. Mahindra and some other business leaders.
The world's nations adopted the Glasgow Climate Pact in November 2021, making this a decade of concerted climate action and support. But the reality is that a lot of work remains to be done to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade by the end of the century. India has committed to achieve net zero emissions by 2070, and this transition will require the coming together of various actors, including commercial enterprises. The Indian building and construction sector has an important role to play in this transition because current construction materials and methods have a very high carbon footprint. The building and construction sector contributes to around 25% of India's greenhouse gas emissions, and on current course, the emissions from this sector would nearly double by 2050. While rapid urbanization and rising incomes have spurred growth in the real estate sector, they've also contributed to burgeoning energy demand. 60% of the buildings that India will need in 2040 still need to be built. And this gives us a unique opportunity to build well and build right if we set our minds to the task. Buildings can achieve zero carbon performance. It's achievable. But it's time for us to fuel innovation in this important area. Demand reduction through design optimization is an important first step. In conjunction with modern construction technologies, digitalization, and alternative thinking. I'm optimistic that this will enable demand flexibility in buildings, generate a demand shift, and leverage newer business ecosystems that prioritize low carbon materials and help reduce emissions. At the Mahindra Group, we are pledged to becoming carbon neutral by 2040, and we've committed to take science-driven action. We are invested in many related businesses, including green buildings, green industrial parks, and integrated cities, therefore making sustainability sustainable, not just for us, but for the benefit of the built and living environment. This has not and should not be a compulsion. But I want to say this out loud, that this is where the opportunity lies. Businesses that judiciously plan their green portfolio, businesses that are on the path to providing alternatives, businesses whose products and services embody and encourage environmental and social responsibility, businesses that have built new models of sustainability. These are the businesses that will sustain and in fact thrive in the future. Today, I want to urge Indian industry, the CEOs and all real estate businesses and stakeholders to join forces in this call to action to manifest that leadership is action rather than a position. Let's all join forces to raise our collective ambition. Let's accelerate the necessary business transformation to put the Indian construction and development sector on a net zero pathway. It's going to be a breathless marathon, but our actions in the short term will set us on course to meet our long-term Paris goals and our announcements at COP26 of transitioning India to a net zero economy.
नमस्कार, मेरा नाम अनुराग वाजपेयी है और मैं ग्रीन ट्री ग्लोबल संस्था को रिप्रेजेंट करता हूँ। ये संस्था ब्यूरो ऑफ एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी के साथ एज ए नेट ज़ीरो डिज़ाइन कंसल्टिंग फर्म की तरह भी पैनल्ड है। मुझे पूर्ण विश्वास है कि रेस टू ज़ीरो इज़ अ वे फॉरवर्ड और द चार्टर इज़ वेरी मच अलाइंड टू आवर फोकस एरियाज़ और इसीलिए वी हैव डिसाइडेड टू बिकम द सिग्नेटरी टू दिस एज वेल। जहाँ तक लोगों को इस मूवमेंट में जोड़ने का सवाल है, मुझे लगता है कि देयर कैन बी 3 पॉइंट्स। पहला पॉइंट, पॉलिसी पुश। गवर्नमेंट शुड नॉट बी मेकिंग द रेगुलेशंस ओनली, दे शुड एक्चुअली लुक एट मोर फ्रॉम द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन साइड। सेकेंड पॉइंट, द अवेयरनेस शुड बी एट एवरी लेवल. It should not be only limiting to the higher level, but it should actually cover the bottom and middle level as well. Third point, the top level management should not be only making the statement. Their commitment should be more visible. The commitment should also be covering the budget allocation and their time allocation as well. जहाँ तक मुझे लगता है कि मेरे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में मेरे कोलीग और पार्टनर्स का इस तरीके के मूवमेंट में सहयोग की बात है, ये कि जहाँ पर भी हम लोग कंसल्टिंग करते हैं और डिफरेंट क्लाइंट्स, मैन्युफैक्चरर्स, कॉन्ट्रैक्टर, उनके साथ में जब काम करते हैं, वी नीड टू नॉट टू स्टिक टू द बेसिक कंप्लायंसेस. हमें नेट ज़ीरो, कार्बन न्यूट्रल, इन सब चीज़ों के बारे में उनको बताना चाहिए और उस तरीके के क्वालिटी स्टैंडर्ड्स को या स्पेसिफिकेशंस को एडवोकेट करना चाहिए. सेकंड, जब हम बहुत सारे इस तरह के स्टेक होल्डर से मिलते हैं, वी श्योरली नीड टू लुक एट in terms of making their capacity enhanced. As an individual professional, if I look at how this charter may impact me or what is the way forward from this charter, हम लोगों ने इंटरनेशनल एंड डोमेस्टिक दोनों तरीके के मार्केट को सर्व किया है एंड वी अंडरस्टैंड हाउ दैट द टेक्नोलॉजी इज मूविंग फ्रॉम merely compliance level to maybe net zero level or to the higher or highest standards level. और इसी तरह से हमें लगता है कि हम लोग शायद एक वैल्यू क्रिएट कर सकते हैं अपने पार्टिसिपेशन से और आई लुक फॉरवर्ड टू कंट्रीब्यूटिंग मोर टू दिस मूवमेंट एंड टू दिस चार्टर. थैंक यू सो मच. नमस्कार.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Torgerson, co-founder and CEO of Humenji Mortarless Interlocking Masonry. I may seem like a bit of a hypocrite signing a business charter to decarbonize the construction industry because our blocks use concrete, which is, we all know, one of the dirtiest building materials out there. It contributes 6 to 8% of global greenhouse gases annually. But this is our Humenji block. This is 1/10 scale. It is in full size. It is 6 inches wide compared to the ASTM C90 hollow core block, which is 8 inches wide. Our blocks use probably 20% less concrete material, meaning the walls and the entire structure reduces the amount of concrete used in a structure. This is a sample wall section. You can see it can be reinforced vertically and horizontally. It is very strong without any adhesive. I'm flexing it. The use of cement can be further reduced by using alternative materials. Hempcrete is gaining popularity every day. There are also other alternative mixes out there, such as sulfcrete, which does not use any cement at all. All of these new technologies can be incorporated into the Humenji system. My motivation to sign this is that we all need to work together to help reduce carbon footprint of buildings. And that goes from building materials to the amount of energy used through the life cycle of the building. My message to other stakeholders is, again, we should all work together. I have needs. I need to introduce this to the design community. Our blocks can be produced anywhere on Earth by any current block manufacturer, but we need to create demand. Any designer in the world can start using Humenji blocks right away in their designs. Our technology transfer is free to them. Once they have it in their designs, they can order blocks from a local block factory, or the opportunities are wide open for anyone to build a Humenji factory anywhere in the world. So I look forward to working with you all, and please contact me if you have any questions. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Anand G. I'm the founder of Green Jams, an award-winning clean tech enterprise working to remove 10% of global carbon dioxide emissions. We make carbon negative building materials to address the 45% share of buildings in global carbon emissions and prevent 2 billion tons of crop residues from being destroyed annually. Our flagship innovation, Agrocrete, is a carbon negative building material made from crop residues like paddy straw, bagasse, cotton stalks, etc., and non-toxic byproducts from steel and power plants. It is a 100% upcycled product which reduces the cost of construction by up to 50% and improves the energy efficiency of the building by up to 25%. Considering our mission to reverse climate change through our construction materials, it was only natural for us to become a signatory to the business charter for decarbonizing the building and construction industry. Further, the charter is being hemmed by WRI, AEEE, Mahindra Life Spaces, and EcoCollab, which are organizations that are leading the charge on decarbonizing the construction sector. Finally, none of us is as smart as all of us. To achieve a fully net zero construction industry and then to move on to net negative, it would take the concentrated power of will of all of us. It is only through collaboration and synergistic relationships would we achieve all the goals of this business charter. And I'd like to sign off now with a hope and a wish that I contribute as much as I learn from all the fellow signatories. Thank you.
We at Green Tech Knowledge Solutions Private Limited are delighted to be a part of the business charter for value chain approach to decarbonize the building and construction sector in India. I would like to congratulate WRI-India, Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, AEEE, EcoCollab, and Mahindra Lifespace developers for this timely initiative. The whole life carbon emissions from buildings consist of 3 main components: the upfront embodied carbon. The second component is the use phase carbon, which also include the carbon associated with the operation energy required to heat, cool, and operate the building. The third component is the end of the life carbon, which is associated with the deconstruction of the building at the end of its useful life, processing and disposal of the waste. There are a large number of actors which are involved in the value chain. They need to be influenced to achieve the decarbonization of the building sector. Green Technology Solutions has been working with several of these key actors. Let us take case of brick manufacturing. In residential buildings, bricks alone contribute to almost 20% of the upfront embodied carbon. Brick manufacturing in India is highly fragmented. We have been working with the brick industry for more than 25 years now and have seen carbon emissions being reduced by almost 40%. However, it is possible to move towards near zero bricks. We are in active dialogue with the industry about these possibilities. However, such a transformation requires upgradation of several thousand small enterprises and impacts livelihood of several million workers. It requires engagement of central and local governments and access to technology and finance. Similar efforts are needed for other building materials as well. And we would need a people and enterprise-centric approach to bring about such a transformation. Not only the architects, but the structural engineers also have an important role in designing a building having low embodied carbon. Recently, working with our partners, we have shown that through efficient structural design and right choice of materials, it is possible to cut the material and carbon intensity by half in case of low and medium-rise residential buildings. We have to think about what would be needed to mainstream such construction. A lot of work has taken place in India during last 15 years in the area of energy efficient building design. We have energy conservation building code for commercial building, and Green Technology Solutions have been involved very closely with the government in the development of the Eco-Niwas Samhita for the residential buildings. How do we make these codes mandatory is a key challenge. We hope that this new initiative, based on value chain approach, would help in overcoming these challenges and fast track decarbonization of the building and construction sector in India.
Thank you to all the leaders who have shared with us an important message of how design optimization, demand reduction, and alternative demand is essential for this huge goal of decarbonization. I'm sure the ideas have invoked many of us today. With this, we now move to the next session, wherein I would like to hand it over to Ms. Arundhati Seth, co-founder EcoCollab, to moderate the partners' presentation on the approach and key takeaways, which have laid block and are the evidence and backbone to the development of the business charter. Ms. Arundhati is an architect, urban designer, sustainability professional, and a lead AP. Her extensive experience led to identifying gaps in the sustainable building space and the founding of EcoCollab along with Ms. Anamika Garg. She is heading the design division and manages sustainability master plan and life cycle analysis for projects. Over to you, Ms. Arundhati. Thank you.
Thanks, Faiza. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Good afternoon, distinguished panelists, and to all our participants. The building and construction sector is a very diverse and fragmented value chain. The sector has the largest global footprint of raw materials which are extracted from natural resources and processed in coal power factories. The business as usual design and construction of building leads to high embodied carbon, subsequently increasing the operational inefficiencies and even higher demand of energy to condition these building spaces. In COP26, India presented a long-term vision to achieve net zero by 2070. Such vision requires deep decarbonization from all key sectors of the economy, especially the building and the construction sector, which contributed to about 25% of India's carbon emissions in 2016. Today, businesses are uniquely positioned to influence the buildings and construction value chain and to adopt a low carbon pathway. The question is, how can this be achieved? So WRI, along with its partners, conducted stakeholder consultations, followed by consolidation of opportunities. And today, we have gathered for the launch of this business charter. So the launch of this business charter is presented to you by WRI-India, Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, AEEE, EcoCollab, and Mahindra Life Spaces with Bloomberg Philanthropies. Now, the building and the construction sector, I mean, we have seen these numbers many times, but just to go over them once again, contributes to 9% of GDP. We are the second largest employment generator. About 51 million people are employed by the sector. The sector attracted 26 billion USDs in foreign direct investment. The sector increased by 8% compound annual growth rate. So with the contributions also comes consequences. The building operations accounted for about 28% global emissions, while constructed related industries like cement, steel, and glass added to another 10% by 2019. The carbon dioxide emissions is expected to increase to 245 million tons by 2050. The sector is also responsible for 28% of air pollution and an increased freshwater consumption by 12%. Overall, this business as usual model has negative social and environmental impact. Now, if we need to be on the track for net zero by 2050, certain projected targets must be achieved. We must aim to have all new buildings as carbon ready by 2030. By 2040, we must have at least 50% of existing buildings retrofitted to zero carbon levels. And by 2050, more than 85% of all buildings needs to be zero carbon ready. So for these targets to be met, the transition to net zero must start now. Now, if we focus on this green segment of the bar chart, we will see an increased contribution of the manufacturing and construction industry towards GHG emissions. India is the third largest consumer of energy, and about 80% of our energy is still being met by coal. So the breakup of the manufacturing and construction industry emissions from iron, steel, and cement attributes to about 48% of carbon dioxide emissions. Next slide, please. So many of us have seen these numbers. The residential sector will overtake the industrial sector for energy demand, which is estimated to be 1,800 terawatts by 2047. The cement production will grow to about 800 million tons by 2030. What does all this mean? This means that India will need an energy grid the size of the European Union just to meet our demands by 2040. Also, India's destiny will be forged by buildings and factories yet to be built, the vehicles and appliances yet to be bought, and the government policies that will drive these consumptions. So to find out more what can be done, WRI-India, along with its partners, AEEE, EcoCollab, and Mahindra Life Spaces, engaged with 150 key stakeholders through a period of 4 weeks in June and July of 2021. So the topics covered were designing net zero buildings, construction and operations, occupier's perspective, and material efficiency. So these consultations helped shape the voluntary business charter with 6 priority action areas that will facilitate the process of transitioning to net zero. So now we'll come over to the session recaps. Session 1, Designing Net Zero Buildings, was conducted by MLDL. I will be handing over to Dr. Sunita, Head of Sustainability at Mahindra Lifespace Developers. Over to you, Dr. Sunita.
Dr. Sunita, if you're speaking, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Arundhati. So I'll just take a recap of the session 1, Designing Net Zero Buildings. What is important while understanding how we design net zero buildings is to have a common language. If we don't have a common language, we will not be able to understand where to reduce, how to reduce, and what are the different areas that need to be addressed. So this also provides an opportunity to minimize the accounting and quantification related risks so that we are all on the same page when we say that this is a net zero building in terms of operation. This is a net zero building in terms of true zero, if in terms of embodied carbon. So it's important to understand that we all stakeholders have a common net zero accounting language, which enables us to understand and track the emissions with respect to science-based target. And this requires a great amount of awareness and capacity building. I'll come to the policy and demonstration aspect later. But unless you understand the nitty-gritties of carbon accounting and also enable a rising consumer awareness that what is the building footprint that you are purchasing, or what is a building footprint out of which you are operating in terms of commercial real estate, we will not be able to create a demand of low carbon buildings, and therefore a demand of alternative materials and energy efficient technologies. And it is a very wide gap that we need to fulfill in terms of the common language awareness that we need to build amongst the stakeholders who are designing these net zero buildings, the architectural community, the customers who are going to be buying these buildings. So we require an ecosystem-driven approach, which are led by institutions, collaborations with small and large firms, coupled with ideation and the psychological perception of what we need to build today so that we are within the limits of 1.5 degree temperature rise. We can curtail that and keep it to that 1.5 degree. So with that, we would need to substantiate that with policy and demonstration to understand how passive and climate responsive technologies can help us reduce the operational carbon and therefore thermal comfort, visual comfort, ventilation within homes, smart technologies and new materials that can help us reduce embodied carbon, policy regulations backed by implementing guidelines. So, and at all levels, not just at central, subnational, local levels, so that like we have, the local authorities that can help us build accountability for the building codes and the guidelines that need to be, adopted for designing high performance energy efficient building stock. And what we need is a integrated approach to building design. And this integrated approach to building design has long-term co-benefits for customers and the property owners and various relevant stakeholders. If we look at it early on in the design stage, right at the beginning, even when we are looking at the massing, or even when we are designing a city, this approach can help developers and industrial parks save a lot of upfront money on capex and avoid all the mistakes of developing a high carbon building, high operational carbon building. Selection of materials right up front. What is the material palette? And therefore, there is a integrated design approach which requires consent between who you're designing the building for and all the stakeholders, including the MEP teams, the in-house design teams, the external architectural teams, and so on. So the approach has to be fairly integrated. So these are some of the feedback from session 1 that can help us design net zero buildings and overcome some of these challenges that we currently have. Over to you, Arundhati.
Thanks, Dr. Sunita. So now I will be introducing Anamika. She's an architect, urban planner, and co-founder of EcoCollab. Anamika leads the Green Building Certifications vertical and ideation of eco homes templates within EcoCollab. Over to you, Anamika, for session 2 recap.
Thanks for that introduction, Arundhati, and thank you for summing up session 1 so well, Dr. Sunita. I hope I'm clearly audible. Session 2 was focused on construction and operations, and some of the main stakeholders who were invited for this session were builders and construction companies, subcontractors, developers, and equipment suppliers. And this session was jointly moderated by EcoCollab and AEEE, and we addressed it in 3 phases. So the first phase dealt with the challenges, that is policy, framework, and development. The second phase dealt with construction, and the third phase dealt with during construction with regards to materials and implementation. The subject of capacity building, upskilling, and just transitions for construction workers was also brought up towards the end, because when you talk about construction, you cannot ignore the people who make construction possible. So moving on to the biggest takeaways from this session, the first one was again an overarching discussion about the lack of awareness, and this was seen across the stakeholder categories, with builders as well as consumers being brought up in the lack of awareness part of it. And the push factor was talked about in 2 aspects of it. So one was talking about the push that is needed for customers to, take the leap into going for a net zero building, and the problems that developers face in convincing customers on the different aspects of net zero buildings and the misconceptions that they have. The same push factor that is needed also creates pushback from clients due to their personal misconceptions and lack of awareness. And there was also a general discussion about the implementation of upskilling and awareness programs, as well as scaling up the same programs. Then one big key takeaway from all the stakeholder discussions was the interdependency that emerged. So basically what was understood was that all stakeholders across the construction value chain are dependent on each other's decisions. Builders depend on contractors, contractors depend on designers, and so on and so forth. So this also kind of leads to a blame game, but this interdependency is what we need to exploit in order to push towards a smoother net zero transition. Then coming back to the push factors and the misconceptions, there was also a direct link with the cost factor. There are myths in the Indian market and the consumers about the cost of green buildings, which also leads to a severe pushback from clients and developers in terms of, even implementing a green building. Also, there was a discussion about a need for green financing as well as government incentives that would push people towards adopting net zero initiatives. Then another thing that emerged was green rating tools and how they consider only operational carbon currently because it is easier to calculate. But the need for considering embodied carbon was also strongly emphasized by all the stakeholders. Another thing was upgraded technology, which must be implemented for both the constructions as well as the operations phase in order to be able to monitor as well as reduce the carbon emissions that are produced across these phases. I would, with this, like to sum up and hand over to Mr. Chirag Gajjar from WRI-India to give us the recap for session 3. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anamika, for highlighting the second session. I will be talking about the third session, which focused on the occupier's perspective, which basically deals with the existing building stock. Now, occupiers or the people who reside in the buildings or uses the building, they are normally absent when the decisions happen at the design stage or at the construction stage, and hence those decisions impact the operational efficiency and the performance of the building, where the people who use the building do not have any kind of a say. So this is kind of a dichotomy that we see in the building and construction sector. However, there were quite a number of stakeholders who participated, who also brought in their own sets of understanding. One of the key understandings that they provided is that there is a lack of awareness and a capacity building. So awareness at the occupier's end, coupled with the lack of implementation of some of the rules that exist in India, impacts the adoption of on-site solutions such as renewable energy or energy efficiency, which could reduce the emissions. So retrofitting can get hampered because of that. There's also a need to build the capacities of the trainers or the operators who operate the building energy management systems and some of the other systems which could be implemented in the buildings, which can approve as a feedback mechanism to the designers and the construction companies. However, the availability rather unavailability of the skilled manpower hampers the adoption of this kinds of tools such as Internet of Things or BEMS. In the absence of such training or in the absence of such systems, the benchmarking becomes very challenging. Benchmarking for energy performance in existing building can provide significant opportunities for savings and valuable inputs for new building that will be designed going forward. As we saw in one of the earlier slides, it would be imperative for the building and construction sector to have a very ambitious pathway, and hence a feedback mechanism should be enabled. However, as one of the earlier leaders spoke about, the availability of the data at the buildings in the building and construction sector is a major challenge, which requires implementation of the building energy management systems as well. Few facility managers and operators who participated in the stakeholder consultation did mention that they have been tracking the data, which has helped them informing the energy efficiency measures in retrofitting the existing buildings. There is a need to provides some of these case studies or the building cases which can enable widespread adoption of some of these issues. Therefore, there is a need of the hour to think of the solutions on how to mainstream some of this energy efficiency or retrofitting measures into the existing buildings. We need to look at the pilot demonstration, which is coupled with careful observation of the operational data to help build confidence for the relevant stakeholders on the energy savings and subsequent recovery of the investment that will be made by the occupiers. While the success is there in the commercial buildings to increase the operational efficiencies, it's a good starting point. The same needs to be replicated across the residential sector as well. Lastly, to scale up the success, we also need to think of innovative business models which can enable financing of the energy efficiency measures, particularly in the existing buildings. The focus should be on passing on the benefits to the occupiers, making it easier to demonstrate the business case of implementing such measures. Thank you so much. I will now hand it over to Dr. Bhaskar from AEEE.
So thank you, Chirag. So on behalf of Dr. Bhaskar, I would be speaking about the session 4. So on the session 4 focused on the material efficiency strategies that mainly focused on 3 important key strategies. One on the reducing the material use through optimized design strategies and techniques. The second key strategy was focusing on substitution of high embodied carbon materials with low carbon alternatives. And third strategy was on recycling and reuse of building materials during the building construction. So the session 4 was the key stakeholders in the session 4 was building manufacturers for both conventional and alternate material manufacturers, as well as designers, structural engineers, and consultants. So the key takeaways from the session 4 were: first was on creating awareness among all the stakeholders at every level on implementation of some of the already existing low carbon strategies, and secondly also on developing a database of embodied carbon of building materials for the design community, because as of now no such database is available, and that's why the embodied carbon there is lack of awareness on the embodied carbon. The second key takeaway was on including material efficiency strategies into the design, and that could be done through updating the existing design and construction guidelines for more sustainable construction practices, and also developing LCA assessment tools for the use of design communities. The third key takeaway was on the capacity development and skilling of the construction workforce on the new low carbon materials and technologies that are coming up in the market, and also ensuring how the widespread availability of the skilled workforce is available across the country. And finally, the last important step was on how to enable the market transformation for mainstreaming some of the available or the existing low carbon solutions. So one was on pilot demonstrations of all of the low carbon technologies and developing or fast tracking the development of standards for these new materials and technologies. And lastly, also including the low carbon materials and technologies into the public procurement guidelines. So I think these were the 4 key takeaways from session 4. Now I would hand over it to Arundhati. Over to you, Arundhati.
Thanks, Deepak. Back to Faiza for conducting the rest of the session.
Thank you, Arundhati. And thanks to all my colleagues for summing up our 4 sessions and our all key takeaways very precisely. So let us now convene for an interesting panel discussion on net zero building and construction sector in India. May I now invite Dr. Bhaskar Natarajan, AEEE, to moderate the panel discussion. Dr. Bhaskar Natarajan has over 25 years of experience in areas related to clean energy, energy efficiency, and sustainable development. He has managed large programs working with donor agencies to scope out program goals and working with multiple stakeholders to deliver efficient results. Over to you, Dr. Bhaskar.
Thank you so much. We now get started on the panel discussion for the business charter launch, value chain approach to decarbonize the building and construction sector in India. We have roughly a little less than 1 hour. The session flow would be as follows. I would briefly introduce the panelists, followed by a brief overview of the topic. We would then request the panelists to make their opening remarks for about 5 minutes. We will then open up the session for questions and comments from the audience. And then we would have closing remarks from all the panelists and wrap up in about 10 minutes. Let me now get to introduce our star panel people. Just 1 second. Yes, we have a very exciting group of experienced panelists. Let me start with Ms. Millie Majumdar, who is presently the Managing Director of GPCI India and also the Senior Vice President of the US Green Building Council. Millie is well known to all the people working in the field of green buildings, and she is responsible at present for technical adaptation and customization of the portfolio of rating systems of GPCI for the Asia Pacific region. She is also a member of the Committee for the Formulation of ECBC, member of the Committee of BIS for revision and updating the National Building Code. She is also the board member of the Global Buildings Performance Network in Paris. I would then come to Mr. Prabodha Acharya, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of the JSW Group. He works to develop and drive sustainability strategy for the JSW Group companies of steel, energy, cement, paints, infrastructure, and others. He has worked for nearly 3 decades in the field of corporate environmental management, emission reduction, climate change, corporate strategy, sustainability, policy development, and assurance services. We also have with us Mr. Prem Chandavarkar, who is a managing partner of C&T Architects. This architect firm is an award-winning and widely published architectural practice based in Bangalore. He's a former executive director of the Shrishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology in Bangalore, and is an academic advisor and guest faculty at the Indian and International Colleges of Architecture. Besides his design practice at C&T, he writes lectures and blogs on architecture, urbanism, philosophy, politics, education, environment, art, and other interesting subjects. We are also glad to have Dr. R.V. Ramani, who's the CEO of Argus Concrete Solutions, specializing in zero concrete cement and several other concrete-based applications. He has held several honorary positions, including a member of the Government of India's National Energy Mission and NRDC. Dr. Mani has held several academic positions and has delivered several talks and published more than 40 papers in the area of geopolymer concrete. We are pleased to have Dr. Sunita Purushottam, who's the head of sustainability Mahindra Lifespace Developers. She is also a member of the Mahindra and Mahindra CSR Council, as well as a board member of GPPN. Dr. Purushottam has over 25 years of sustainability strategy and environmental consultancy experience in the areas of environmental impact assessment, air pollution modeling, GHG emissions inventory, carbon offsets, carbon neutrality, and several other subjects relating to sustainability. Let me now begin by requesting Millie Majumdar to address the audience in terms of how are you driving the decarbonization of the building and construction sector? What are the immediate goals and future plans that you have to complement India's decarbonization targets? This is the question that I would request all the panelists to briefly address for 5 minutes each. Over to you, Millie.
Thank you very much, Dr. Natarajan, and it's indeed a great pleasure to be in this panel. So here, as I speak, I wear 2 hats. One is as the board member of GBPN, and other is senior vice president with the US Green Building Council. But at both, in both the organization, we have a common goal that is striving towards decarbonization in the building sector and through various means and ways. At GBPN, we strive to tackle the climate emergency by decarbonizing the sector. And this we do through powerful coalitions, collaborations, and tangible actions. In India, the particular action that we have been driving is to look at the affordable housing segment, which apparently is not huge energy consumption sector if you're looking at the end use energy consumption, unit by unit, but collectively the residential sector, as we know, consumes huge amount of energy, and particularly in the affordable segment, there is a lot of aspiration within the owners to strive to the next level of economic development within themselves. So there is a rising energy demand in this sector. So it's very challenging. And also there's a huge embodied energy component. So all this collectively is something that we're looking through different actions of GBPN. And now, before I give examples from the work at USGBC, I just wanted to again put my words in context that transitioning or progressing to net zero emissions, as we have heard from everyone, it definitely needs a multi-pronged approach, and we are very happy to understand that the business charter has been adopted. And the business should be definitely cognizant of the boundary of the emissions, including the supply chain, etc. So isolating scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions for each of the businesses that are adopting the chapters and focusing clearly on those would be very critical to achieve what you are aiming at. Just to give you an example, say a building that is located maybe very green, very efficient, but located outside the city limits may have very low scope 1, scope 2 emissions, but maybe very high on scope 3. So, which means that we cannot lose sight of any of these factors. So, supply chain strategy and organizational full life cycle assessment provides a method, definitely for large businesses, particularly ones with very high range of products, geographies, and supply chain to tackle challenges in a holistic way. And in particularly in context of building sector, material is a very, very large stream that gets ignored always. And certainly the business strategy that gets derived from these considerations is strengthened by availability of data and benchmarking, which is very crucial, I think, as we move forward. And within USGBC, we maintain a data tracking platform, which is called ARC, which allows businesses to be able to benchmark themselves, not only with their own businesses and portfolio, but also across the peers, so that one is able to set up substantial targets and move towards them through actions, mitigation actions, as well as they can measure it and move forward. So that is, so I feel data is very crucial, and USGBC is supporting that. Data also helps us to forecast for net zero and take informed choices. And action based on data analytics, it helps us with risk analysis, opportunity analysis, and mitigation planning. Another side to the whole story is what COVID has taught. We may be planning for emission reduction, etc. But on other hand, and we have seen during COVID times that there has been an absolute drop in emissions because the economy was stopped. But then, what is the balance between the two, the development regime, and when we are talking about net zero targets? So building strong resilience plan alongside emission reduction targets is also very critical for each business and this sector, so that we are not impacting the whole sector. We are not taking actions ignoring the economy, people, health, and livelihoods, which we saw clearly disrupted during the COVID times. So setting monitoring targets will be very crucial for all businesses and taking actions. And building sector certainly is intertwined with businesses, people, urban settings, and multiple sectors. Hence, the net zero achievements in this sector shall need a much more collaborative and a comprehensive approach. And we have heard so many reasons. I would like to conclude by saying that we run the Lead Zero program, where we look at net zero emissions from the building sector, particularly on the operational side of it. And there we have seen that some of the key challenges why people, even though they strive to become net zero and they have these targets and goals to do that, there are a lot of external factors that influence their future achievement of the net zero targets and goals. And two of the very critical things that they have pointed out is, of course, the changing policy regimes, the financing, pricing mechanisms, which help them to, which kind of drive them towards certain actions, which may not be good for the environment, but they have to take it for the financing thing. And the other is the people who occupy this building. Many times we have monitored several green buildings, which may have been designed to be, green building, but during operations they fail. I will not take the name, but there is a very big government building that has been designed to be, green, and it has received highest level of certification at all levels. But if you walk into the building, you will see that the people there are not aware of the functionalities they should adopt to meet that goal. So that connect between people, operations, and that entire cycle is very important if you have to achieve this goal. So I'll take a pause here and like to hear from the others. And I think we are in this exercise all together. And I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to achieve the goal going forward.
Thank you so much, Millie. May I now request Shri Prabodha Acharya to make his opening remarks, sir?
Thank you, Dr. Natarajan, and good afternoon to you and to my fellow panelists and all the participants. From the morning, I'm listening about the importance of decarbonizing construction and building sector and how the embodied carbon is playing an important role. Without re-emphasizing, let me tell, I represent a business house that supplies steel and cement, which are two very key components to the building and construction sector. And it contributes almost together 15% of global carbon emissions during the manufacturing process. And I saw Arundhati showing a figure that 43.5%, almost 43% emissions in the industrial sector being contributed by these two sectors in India. So obviously the focus remains that how we decarbonize ourselves, and at the same time these two products or the sectors are also known as hard to abate sector. That means it is difficult to decarbonize. The reason because the process in which these materials are being made are emitting carbon dioxide. In India, if you look at demand from building and construction segment, which accounts for nearly 35 to 40% of steel demand, and that is expected to rise another 5 to 6% in the next 5 years. One product, that is TMT rebar, is most widely used steel product in the construction sector for building reinforcement. We are talking about material efficiency and using alternative materials. I don't know when we will be able to use or find alternative to steel to be used in construction and building sector. And therefore, it is very important that we decarbonize in the production process, and specifically on the TMT rebar, which is frequently used. Let me also tell here, because your question was how we are decarbonizing. In JSW Steel, we have already taken a target to reduce 42% of our CO2 emission intensity by 2030 in the steel manufacturing processes. What we do, we have been conducting life cycle analysis studies to assess the life cycle impact of all our products, and we have made a very process innovation to produce higher strength TMT. So that is without any additional or even lesser environmental footprint than that of a baseline product in the market. The GWP, the global warming potential, and blue water consumptions, we found has been reduced by 0.38% and 2.25% respectively in our new product what we have introduced. Even that has been recognized by World Steel in their Steel Award. So in addition, it is also observed that the use of this high strength TMT products in the building sector can help in reducing the steel consumption itself by 12 to 15%, and therefore you reduce the associated carbon emissions. Now I shift to other product which JSW Cement produced cement that is also used extensively in the building and construction sector, and here also our Portland slag cement emits 63% less CO2 in comparison with any ordinary Portland slag cement. And JSW Cement has the lowest specific carbon footprint in entire global cement industry. We are emitting less than 300 kg per ton of cement in the last statistics. Also, in the same time, I should mention that Indian cement industry as such is doing a lot of things in decarbonizing their sector than the global peers. And this itself demonstrates our commitments toward greener products for building and construction sector. So we will be with the sector together to decarbonize and reduce your embodied carbon. But while we take actions to reduce the embodied emissions, which is important, it is also important to educate and bring awareness among the consumers on the benefit of greener products. Because at the moment, what is happening in the market, nobody gives credit to or preferential treatment to the greener product. Of course, if you have in the same cost, you might get an advantage. So therefore, it is very essential that consumers are educated. I'm not here talking about who will pay the cost of the rapid decarbonization, but at least to start with. And that is where we are actively engaging in promoting awareness through either eco-labeling our products. If you look at our TMT rebars, our cement products, that is composite and Portland cements, all have been Green Pro eco-labeled under the global eco-labeling network by being done by CII in India. And we also have, often EPDs for all our steel products and cement products. So that is to transparently declare our customers what is the end environmental impact, including the GHG potential. And that is the starting point to tell your customers that what you are selling and what is the CO2 impact. So these are the some of the examples what I have listed here to show what we are doing. But of course, as I stated, much more needed to be done. I'll be happy to discuss further and take a pause here, Dr. Natarajan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Acharya. May I now request Mr. Prem Chandavarkar, sir, to give your opening remarks? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we find ourselves, like almost all architectural firms, we might be doing our bit to be sensitive to a sustainable design, but are at the same time aware of a large gap in between what we're doing and what we need to be doing. And I think a charter like this is extremely important, and in explaining why we need to look at how the environmental challenge we face today is so different from that of the past. Because the challenges we faced for the last, we've tackled for the last 30 to 40 years have been in response to ecological feedback loops that occur at a local scale, such as contamination of water, soil, air, etc. And we've evolved design strategies and regulatory mechanisms for this. But the current crisis involves ecological feedback loops that are at a global scale, making them complex, nonlinear, and dispersed over large dimensions of space and time. So it's impossible to delineate clear links between a cause and an effect. One can at the most discern statistical correlations. And this makes it challenging to incentivize changes in behavior, for you cannot give anyone an assurance that if they make the effort to change their lifestyle or consumption choices, a specific and tangible benefit will follow. In addition, the scale and urgency of the challenge is so great, we must incentivize large-scale changes in behavior. It's not enough to deal solely with the supply side of the equation through public policy, governmental regulation, technological innovation, and market incentives. One must also deal with the demand side, affecting large-scale lifestyle changes. So we face the challenge of needing to affect large-scale changes while lacking the means to persuade people to take up this change. The only way to resolve this paradox is to socialize the problem. As my friend Ashwin Mahesh likes to say, the best way to solve a complex problem is to scale up the number of people working on it. And that's why this charter is so important. It creates a social network that scales the people working on the problem. This has four major potential impacts. One, it creates a critical mass of people who can be showcased to start the ball rolling towards widespread change. Second, it breaks information bottlenecks through a network of people to whom information is disseminated. So if one person gets information, all in the network get it. Many people who want to implement changes find it hard to do so because they lack information on design innovation, technological breakthroughs, databases on embodied energy of materials, addresses for recycling centers, and so much more. So this network can reduce the time lag between a best of breed practice becoming an all of breed practice. Third, it can create lateral connections between members that breed a rich support network that facilitates change. Given that one finds it hard to offer tangible results for change in method or lifestyle, a lateral network of peers offers a framework for benchmarking, defining small and concrete steps in moving towards complex goals, steps that can exponentially coalesce into substantive impact. And fourth, and perhaps most important, it has the capacity for emergence. Emergence is a fundamental characteristic of living systems and refers to the capacity of a system to hold fundamental properties at its core that did not exist in earlier states of the system. The connections and exchanges between the members of this charter can yield new possibilities, possibilities that might not have even been envisioned at the time it was launched. And the conditions are laid for such possibilities becoming viral. This makes the system both adaptive and evolutionary, and that is exactly what is needed for rapid scaling. Top-down control will always put brakes on any system. The urgency of the challenge requires rapid scaling, so our strategies have to be complex and emergent. To conclude, we have achieved a significant milestone in launching this charter, but there are miles to go before we sleep. There is a lot more work to be done, and we need to take it further and reflect on the architecture of the network we are creating so we can unleash its evolutionary potential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chandavarkar. May I now request Dr. Ramani to make his remarks, sir? Dr. Ramani. Dr. Vani, you're on mute. Please unmute yourself. Yes.
I think I'm okay now. Okay, thank you, Dr. Natarajan, and the panelists for giving me an opportunity to be a panelist on this very important subject of decarbonization in construction. And I'm also happy that I am a signatory in this charter today and make a small contribution in trying to work on the decarbonization. And I thank Dr. Natarajan for introducing me to the panel. Just as every speaker has been talking about different angles to attack the decarbonization issues, I, being a specialist in geopolymer technology, we have a research lab in US and an application lab in India, Chennai. And we have been doing this work for the last about 12 years. And I would like to share a few thoughts. The thoughts, basically, I'm going to share a lot of numbers with you today, the work that we have done, and then how it has really proved, and I think how it can take it up the future. I feel the 15% of the future concrete is going to be geopolymers, and that's what it is going to work on, this decarbonization. And it's a low carbon cement, as all of you are aware. See, what we did is we showcased now to the industry and the world. We took a challenge and started constructing a 5,000 plus square feet of building totally out of geopolymer, all by ourselves. Our in-house team designed, and then we implemented the entire work, which was completed the 2nd of February 2022. It is in Tamil Nadu, and we specifically chose a remote village just to prove that the geopolymer work can be done anywhere in a remote village too. I'll give you some numbers. Actually, the whole building is weighing about 520 tons. In that 520 tons, what we have saved and what we have achieved, I just want to share. We have saved about 22% of reduction in the use of materials, which otherwise the building weight would have gone up by another 20% plus, which includes saving of 10% in steel and 50 tons of Portland cement. Not a single kilogram of Portland cement was used in the entire construction. Similarly, about 25,000 liters of water was saved, which also means that no water was used in the construction. We also saved about 8,000 square feet of plastering and about 95 tons of waste materials have gone into this construction as a filler and also as an aggregate. We have not used single brick in the construction. And we saved about 34% of time. And that's very tremendous. And we saved about 18% of labor. And that's cost saving. And now I come to the main point. The CO2 reduction is estimated at 65 tons for the entire building. And there's an overall reduction of about 13%. Actually, when we calculate that a normal building that is designed to rate as a gold rating in LEED certification, by just altering to geopolymer, you achieve platinum. I think the green building quotient goes very high. why we constructed this house is we approached the various laboratories attached to CSIR and NRDC, and they are asking us to pay money to test our concrete. And they are asking us to share our mixed design and intellectual property. So then we decided, instead of paying money to them, let us construct on our own. And we associated 2 universities, and they have done a tremendous job in testing at every stage of construction. We used about 10 fresh students during the entire part of this project, and who are now very geopolymer compliance. So I don't want to stretch much further about all the statistics and things, but we at Argus, we are committed to responsible building practices that would deliver the most advanced waste to value system in the planet. And it is our commitment, which we have been doing the last 6 years. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramani. Now, may I request Dr. Sunita Purushottam to make her remarks, please? Dr. Sunita.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the time and the opportunity. My eye is actually on the time more than anything, because we are supposed to wrap up by 1. So bearing that, I'll keep my remarks pretty concise. So how do we, influence as we are undergoing this breathless marathon? And this is something I must confess that it's giving me sleepless nights, because the brain refuses to shut down, because we have all the solutions that we need for a low carbon world? What are the kind of things that we still need to do? So there is a huge to-do list that we are looking at. And one of the key questions, I think, if I were to divide my comments into 4 parts, the key questions to be answered is, what has carbon to do with homes we build today? And this we are trying to reach to every customer to whom home is very dear to that person, right? So explaining that is a huge task. Every person is working out of a building, staying in a building, and there is a disconnect between understanding that these are pretty carbon intensive structures, very polluting, even more polluting than, I would say, industries, which has a lot more control in terms of the equipment that you're going to, and the regulations associated with industrial operations. So homes we build today have a lot to do, and that communication to customers, occupants is very critical. And then how do we harness the power of commitments? And the key question is, what are the commitments, or what are the goals and commitments that one needs to take in this race, in this breathless marathon? So I'll talk a little bit about the power of commitments and the strategies that we use within and to influence within, and strategies to influence outward. So I'm dividing this whole, the comments into 4 sections. What has carbon to do with homes we build today? How do we harness the power of commitments? What are the strategies to influence within? And the strategies to influence outward. So homes, we know, are the most polluting, contributing, and all the earlier speakers' opening remarks, comments showed us that, they are not only highly carbon intensive, but are causing drinking water pollution, air pollution, climate change, landfill waste. So the impact of real estate on environment is deep, and decarbonization is the challenge that we need to really address and decouple it. And that's the economic paradox that we are looking at. So we would want to actually harness the power of commitments to drive action. While commitments are the starting point, 20 companies at the Mahindra Group committed to set science-based targets way back in 2018. And this was what Anand Mahindra had declared, that 20 companies will sign off. And subsequently, he also said that by 2040, we are going to be carbon neutral for all the companies that, across the group. So we got our carbon science-based target approved, and it's important to take science-based approach. And I'm emphasizing on it. This is because one of the points in the charter that have you taken a science-based approach? Otherwise, you wouldn't really know how are you doing with respect to the 1.5 degree pathway that the world needs to approach. So we got our science-based targets approved in 2019. We came up with the action plan, and we announced our target. And it's important that how we engage internally to understand the deep inventory, the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and how we are influencing what is our emission share, and engage internally with all the stakeholders, showing that, hey, this is how we are contributing for across our businesses. The emission share by companies, the emission share by categories, with the emission shared by activities, and so on. So slicing and dicing, understanding the data, understanding what it is telling us, does help change the perspective of influencing within. So the strategies that we employ are building level strategies which focus on passive design, passive sustainable design, demand reduction, climate responsive design, then energy saving techniques, then go on to renewable energy integration on-site, off-site, and then look for offsets. Offsets would be the last one that we would look at. And passive strategies have a huge potential, and beginning early on is very important. So these are some of the strategies that we utilize, and therefore every building is an opportunity for sustainable development. Construction activities, lean construction, influencing air quality, mitigating the pollution of water, air, ensuring that material gate in and gate out is strictly managed and controlled at every location. The social accountability are the other aspects. The biodiversity management, site planning are the other aspects that we look at during the construction phase. And in working with the architectural team to look at all aspects, so that we are not only able to do our certification, but are able to move towards net zero energy, water, and waste. Leveraging the green ratings to lower the carbon footprint, and moving towards the ratings for waste, health and well-being. Energy is a net zero energy, net zero water, also leverages and develops deep understanding within the organization as to how we can take actions outlined therein. And we start with the site selection. We look at, during the business development, we look at the risks, we look at all the aspects, and then determine how product will be developed so that we are able to deliver a low carbon product. So sequential approach to moving towards net zero is important. So we can't go from business as usual to net zero directly. It is a stepped approach where we look at reduction in demand, energy efficiency, and renewable energy, and forward. And influencing outward is the other key thing. We don't have answers to everything. We need to work together. And that helps us talk, collaborate, influence. And we have in the past formed a coalition called the Sustainable Leadership Housing Coalition, which was a CEO-led think tank with IFC. And the objectives were to make 100% green portfolio, 20% reduction in incremental variable costs for sustainable housing construction to improve the business case for green buildings, and provide leadership and advocacy for broader action, and also customer awareness piece. We have set up the Terry Center of Excellence, which is a center with the objective to develop innovative energy efficient solutions tailored to Indian climates and water resilience at city level. And we've completed 5 years of this center. It is an NABL accredited lab with it's a net zero facility. We are undergoing the certification for that. So these are some of the strategies that we have. CSR is also aligned to ensuring that the young people, young children are able to influence upward. It's a unique program called the Green Army, where we, talk to children through schools, through family-based programs, through green school programs, to influence how we can reduce mitigate the impacts of climate change, environmental pollution through individual action. So these are some of the strategies that we deploy for decarbonization, but there is a lot more work to be done, including a lot of collaboration, seeking solutions, identify who all can work together in this decarbonization journey. So the journey begins anew now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sunita, for that. My eye is also on the clock, and I'm going to perhaps have 5 minutes for a couple of questions from the participants in case they have any. Faiza, do you see any raised hands? Is anyone have a question to any of our panelists specifically?
Request participants, if they have any questions, to raise their hands. If not, drop us in the chat box section.
Well, while we wait for the audience to respond, maybe perhaps I would pose a quick question to Mr. Acharya. You have heard Dr. Ramani speak about the innovation in the building product, and I'm sure there are several others that you would have come across. What do you really see as the future business opportunity in the next 10 years for such product? Would they be really become a part of the business opportunities for conventional producers such as yours, sir?
Thank you, Dr. Natarajan, for that question. I think I subscribe to the initial remark in the session that we need to look at decarbonization as a business opportunity. At least in JSW, we also look at this, decarbonization is a business opportunity, is not a business threat. Yes, we need to decarbonize. So therefore, these alternative materials or low carbon material or sustainable products are going to gain momentum and importance. The things are changing very fast. As it is said that the technological innovation take the exponential route, so also the use of materials and development of technology. So my view in short answer will be this is the future. And if you ask me, how, how we as a group are responding to it, and I told we are in a sector which is carbon intensive, difficult to decarbonize, but at the same time, steel is a material which is being used as long as human being have discovered it, and it is going to get used because it's a beautiful material. It is 100% recyclable material. The question is that how we can eliminate the process of depending on the fossil fuels while making it. There is a challenge, there is a cost, but I'm sure society will be willing to pay the cost. Just to give a figure, that if in India, from 2020 to 2050, we are estimating almost $250 billion are required to decarbonize the steel sector. And the good news is that in the entire world, this sector, if you want to decarbonize, it only requires 0.1% of GDP of the world. It's contributing around 0.7% of GDP to the world. So it's possible.
Thank you, sir. There is a question I have from one of the participants. How does one convince a real estate developer to build a net zero building? Anyone would like to answer? Sunita or Millie?
I think Sunita is already convinced. So, Mahindra Lifespace being one of the largest developers.
Yes, right.
If they're convinced, it is just the opportunity to replicate it. So what made you convince Sunita? Get convinced rather.
Yeah, all the sleeplessness actually for the climate impact. I think more and more if people demand, there will be more of these. So I think understanding of the subject and the inherent impact that it is causing convinced me to convince people, and that's how we take it. But I think every person on earth should be convinced that this is the kind of life I would like to lead. This is the kind of home I want. This is the kind of office I work in. And I think people are having that realization. And COVID enabled that. So it will get better.
If I just may chip in for a general remark here, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
For any business, the best way to convince to go for is to show that there is a financial imperative and there is a business benefit. There is a philanthropy side, there is a good to have side, but in business, hard decisions are taken based on is it going to make the business sustainable, profitably sustainable. So I'm sure Sunita has convinced that to their management, and that is therefore they have transferred. I think all business, all product, not only construction sectors, is best way to convince is that there is a financial benefit in it.
If I may add,
expand on that, I think we have to shift the way we estimate the cost of a project and shift from total cost of execution to total cost of ownership. So that we not look at the cost not just on the day one of completing the project, but also the cost of living in that project, say for 10 years. And so we need to develop methodologies for doing these kind of estimates and talk to people in the real estate industry about how they can use that kind of cost estimation as a marketing tool. So that will offer the financial side of it.
Yes,
we
Dr.
have
Sunita.
done that. So basically, Prabodh and Prem, we have actually done that. And the business side and convincing the stakeholders within the organization through the lens of benefit, financial benefit. And since one of the business levers is what is the value that we are generating for the customers. So understanding it from both perspectives, that these initiatives through the life cycle of the construction enables a variety of benefits to both us as well as the customers, has convinced us to take the action.
Yeah, in my view, it is a duty of the government first to put their first step. And if they implement all these strategies and things in their project, I think that would be a great way to make a big start. Instead of just convincing real estate people, I think government is the biggest real estate person.
Absolutely, sir. There is one comment that has come in terms of, are there any developments on developing embodied carbon database of construction materials? If so, the IFC's Edge Green Building team would be more than happy to collaborate. Any comment from the panelists?
I have a moderate database from the US, maybe which I could share.
Sure.
So
Anyone else? Yes, Millie.
Yeah, so there are the international databases, which are, which Dr. Ramani mentioned. But what happens is that in Indian context, it will vary, because transportation,
Right.
everything is very different.
Yeah.
So it has to be very locally developed. For some of the materials, it is there, and like the large organizations like glazing industry and some of Mr. Acharya mentioned about making these EPDs, the environmental product declarations, etc. So that requires you to do the embodied energy calculation as the part of the whole life cycle analysis. But currently, the service that is getting offered here and the data availability to make this database is very limited.
Right.
And it has to, and it's very expensive to make. Like one EPD currently will cost about, for one product, maybe 20 lakh rupees. Okay. For large corporations, it is easy. But then, you have to see that kind of business growth. So and to the point that, if you make it mandate, say within government, large tenders, etc., if it is mandated that, you have to have products that are green certified, having EPD, then automatically there would be scales and people would do it more. So of late, what we have seen is, yes, there are people who are getting into the process, of making it, but only large manufacturers. It cannot be currently done by the SMEs and down the line. So there's a big gap there, which I guess needs to be filled.
Thanks a lot. A couple of comments in terms of how is this whole thing going to be followed up. I can assure the persons who put this comment that the entire team of WRI-India, Co2 and Mahindra Lifespace will be taking up further actions after this event to ensure that we take these to a logical conclusion and fast track the process of addressing the key issues that each one of you has made in this discussion. I'm afraid, again, looking at the clock, I would perhaps now request each one of you in 1 minute to give us 2 quick things that the partners must address in the next couple of years to make this move forward. May I request Millie to start?
Yeah, I think, data, collecting data, benchmarking, and also one thing that was pointed out was capacity building of people.
Thank you. Mr. Acharya?
Yeah, I agree with Millie. And additionally, it is, while capacity building, bringing in awareness is very important. And the product side, EPD, I think we have discussion now. So, let's stop there.
Yes, Mr. Chandavarkar?
I'll just emphasize what I said in my remarks, that we have to run this as a social network going forward so that we share, collaborate, and create new possibilities.
Absolutely, sir. Dr. Ramani? You're on mute, sir.
The best way to go forward is to address the students of today.
Excellent.
Who are going to be the future of tomorrow. And if they are being imbibed with all these things, I think that's the best way to take it to the level that we want to do.
Excellent, sir. Dr. Sunita?
So take this from closed room discussions outside to influence as many people as possible. So we really need to spread the word.
Thank you so much to all the panelists. I would now wish to take this opportunity to wrap up this discussion and thank each and every one of you for having shared some very insightful actions and also in terms of the work that each one of you are doing. And I'm sure the partners here, WRI-India, Co2 and Mahindra Lifespace are going to meet after this in the next few weeks to chart out our course of action and to ensure that we make this a mainstream activity. All your suggestions in terms of awareness, making this a large-scale activity, taking it out from the closed rooms to the public, all these will be addressed by the partners in this program. Thank you so much once again for your insightful comments, and let me hand this back to Faiza. Over to you, Faiza.
Thank you, Dr. Bhaskar. It was a really hearty and engaging conversation. So as we now come towards the end of the event, I would request Ms. Ulka Kelkar, Director of the Climate Program at WRI-India, to give a vote of thanks and invoke us with her closing remarks. Ms. Ulka Kelkar, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure to listen and learn from all the experts today. And it's really my pleasant task to thank everyone on behalf of WRI, all our partners, but even more so on behalf of the partners and ourselves, all the experts who participated in our various sessions and so generously shared their ideas, their experiences, including those who participated in the panel discussion today. Thank you so much. Very warm thanks to all the audience members as well and to our funder. I think for me, there are 2 takeaways from everything that I've heard today. One, that this is all about people, the people who build our cities, our homes with their labor, people like yourselves who provide ideas and innovations, and those people who invest their hopes and aspirations in these structures. So I think if we keep that at the center of our work, and also remember the great responsibility that this sector has in converting targets and commitments into actions. That difference between commitments and actions is the difference between hope and cynicism in the public at large. So we need robust methodologies, we need transparency and accountability, and we need to keep learning and sharing, learning from setbacks as well as from positive examples. So thank you once again, and hopefully this will be the beginning of a beautiful conversation and much action in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelkar, for your insightful thoughts. Once again, a big hearty thank you and welcome to everybody who spared your valuable time today with us. We look forward to joining hands with many other influential businesses who have joined us today to voluntarily adopt the charter and take this journey ahead to accelerate India's announcement at COP26 in Glasgow for transition to a net zero economy. If we start today with short-term targets aimed at 2030, we are almost there to achieve our long-term national goals. Yet the beginning and many more initiatives to follow. Until we meet you all again on a yet other big event, stay safe and stay healthy. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.